So, welcome back to Discernment. This is our second session here where I'm introducing what are the healthy components of a relationship. So, we have to really define that because sometimes when we're in relationships, we're like, is that really healthy? Do I have the healthy aspects of a relationship? Am I making this up? Am I making my unhappiness up? Um, and so, I want you to think about these things and also think about how you must have these things yourself to have your own happiness, okay? So that's really important. We don't only act in a relationship with somebody else without acting within a relationship with ourselves. So we can project a whole bunch of our unhappiness onto another person without really knowing that. And that's obviously an unhealthy part of a relationship, but I want you to be very clear with what's yours and what's the other person's and what's the must of the two of you together, right? So each person has to be doing that to themselves, which brings the first one up to be first trait up to be like individuality, right? We have to respect that we each are very different individuals. We might have, and hopefully we do have, a lot of commonalities in values, but we are definitely two individuals, two separate individuals, and we have to respect and appreciate that there's difference. And so the difference isn't a pathologizing thing, it's a difference. And a lot of people have very different ways of doing things and very different ways of thinking. And that has to be an expansion from your mind to the other person's way of being, and from their mind to your way of being. And for you to also accept your own individuality. Like, what is it about you that's like really great? And what is it about you that's not so great? And accepting ourselves and admitting and being accountable to that is super important in a relationship. So we're talking about appreciation, right? Appreciation for individuality, appreciation also for independence. There's always this thing in relationships about the distance that we keep. Some people need to be very independent in a relationship, and that may be very triggering for another person. And other times people are just right? They're just independent enough, almost like the same, so the other person can handle it. But the reason why independence is so important is because one person's love is not enough. It's just absolutely not where you're going to get all your needs met. So you have to get your needs met by other things in your life, other friends, activities, um, interests. That's critical. And so when we look at independence, we look at that idea about the distance you keep, and is the distance that your partner's keeping from you too much, or is it too little? And that is something to talk about, which brings me to the next topic, which is communication. Can you talk about the hard things? So communication um, is important because you have to be able to talk about even just what I said, individuality and independence, without getting into a fight. So it's productive communication, even though it's difficult, it's productive. And that you work on things together and come up to with conclusions together. And there isn't this like endless not being able to figure stuff out. So the healthy trait is healthy communication, where there's solution oriented communication, and people are allowed to have their opinions and their voice, and it's respected. And then there's a need for boundaries. So boundaries in relationship instead of expectations. And that's an incredibly important distinction, because we can have a lot of expectations about somebody, but if a person has boundaries towards us, we have to really remember that boundaries doesn't mean they're trying to control us. It means they're trying to communicate to us how to love them, that they need certain sort of boundaries for themselves to be able to be themselves. So, for example, like let's say you are a person that's very insecure and you need a ton of reassurance, like every day. Tell me 35 times a day that you love me, and I will be able to feel good with you. And in some way, that person might be not seeking that kind of reassurance and need boundaries from the amount of reassurance you're seeking from them. Like you have an expectation that to be loved, someone's going to reassure you every time you're insecure about something. And they can hold a boundary and say, I can't do that all the time. But I want you to know that I do love you and I am here for you and I want to be in this relationship with you. But that insecurity of yours is something that you're going to need to work on because I can't fill all of that. That is a healthy boundary, and that is making very, very clear an expectation. So far we've talked about respect, appreciation, independence, individuality, communication, and boundaries versus expectations. I think the other one is taking responsibility in a relationship and having a certain sense of responsibility in a relationship and being accountable for whatever it is that you're responsible for. And this is the work of relationships. Like it might be this sense of that there's an agreement of tasks, for example. There's an agreement of trust. Trust is another important part of a healthy relationship, that you know how to trust that person and they're trustworthy. You can count on them. These are the core things that are really important in relationships. When these things go awry, then that's where I feel like counseling comes into play. And our next video session, we'll be talking about the unhealthy traits in relationships and how to work with those. But for right now, I want you to just use this as a checklist to see in our discernment process. We're looking at what parts of your relationship are healthy and working well. That's important to distinguish because there's always strengths in a relationship, and it's so much easier to work from the strengths to the weaknesses because it's easier to open up um, into looking at the relationship as a whole. It's like, okay, what's working, and where are the places that we can rely on, sort of building these other traits that we might not have, and then we can start looking at where the weaknesses are, and if we have the internal strength in the relationship to start and coping mechanisms that we can start working on the harder things in the discernment process to decide whether the relationship has a chance, and to make a very rational, non-emotional decision about that. Another healthy aspect to relationships is being able to have fun. So remember the very beginning of your relationship where you were able to really connect, be intimate, have lots and lots of overlap time. And of course, that couldn't continue at the same level at the beginning of the relationship as maybe when 10 years have passed. But the ability to be able to drop everything and be in a connecting space with the other person, no matter what's going on, so that things don't influence, like stress does not influence the connection. The ability to be intimate is continually worked on, and the ability to have fun and be able to have humor and fun, um, and that may come from lots of just different aspects, like a certain compatibility, a certain ability to collaborate together around domestic tasks, strategies, life goals that you have, even annual goals that you have of making money, saving money, going on vacation, um, having a social life that you both really agree with and value, having the things that you value be a part of your daily and weekly life with your partner, being able to share things and being able to be knowing very much who your partner is and what's important to them. These are very healthy aspects in relationships and something that you should consider as strengths. And again, take a note of what are the strengths that your relationship has now, and maybe highlight some of the ones that you want to develop to be a little bit stronger.